Sean O'Malley put on a striking masterclass to defeat Marlon Vera tonight at UFC 299. In this video, we're going to do a little bit of an anatomy and physiology lesson here about this knee that O'Malley delivered to Vera that somehow Vera was able to take. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and my goal in this channel is to help teach you about the medical side of the sports world. And a knee like this is not something that we've actually talked about from an anatomy and physiology standpoint. We'll discuss sort of all the muscles involved, the nerves involved, the biomechanics of how O'Malley delivered this knee, and then also touch on how it's possible that Vera was able to eat this shot and still continue to fight. What we see in the sequence is a rapid right hip flexion as he's exploding and pushing off on his left knee. So in this position right here to start this, O'Malley is setting all this up. He knows exactly what he's gonna do. His right leg is behind him. His hip is extended. If we draw a straight line right down here through his torso, anything where his thigh is behind that line is going to be hip extension. Anything where it's in front of that line is going to be hip flexion. So here in this position, the right hip is an extension. The main muscle that's going to flex the hip forward, the iliopsoas and then the rectus femoris to a degree, are in tension. They're being eccentrically loaded here. They're basically prepping with this pre-stretch in order to then deliver that contractile force forward to begin that rapid hip flexion. So now we're seeing him swing through. Now we've kind of crossed through that central line. So right here, we're in a neutral position. We now start to go into that rapid hip flexion. The primary muscles, the iliopsoas, the rectus femoris. The rectus femoris is one of the quad muscles. It's going to run from the front of the pelvis across the hip joint and all the way down to be one of the quadricep muscles. The iliopsoas originates on the back side of the lumbar spine and then goes deep inside the pelvis, just barely crossing the hip joint and inserting on a part of the femur called the lesser trochanter. So both of those muscles are going to be firing to rapidly swing this femur through, rapidly swing him up into hip flexion while his left knee is going into knee extension. That left knee going into knee extension allows all of his momentum to start from the ground, to start from his base, swing forward upwards. If he didn't extend this left knee by firing his quadricep to extend that knee and straighten it out, you can even see there a little bit of the outline of that vastus lateralis, he wouldn't have as much power. So it's this unison of exploding off the ground as he drives that right hip forward up into hip flexion. And just as he about to make contact here, we see he gets right into full extension. So everything is timed perfectly here with being able to deliver that knee. Now we see we're at about 90 degrees of hip flexion. So that's going to be the angle right here, about 90 degrees. And then the point of contact that's striking is going to be, in ideal situations, potentially the patella. The patella is the kneecap. That's where there's going to be the most hard bone to make contact. Probably in this case was more just the end of the femur and the lower portions of those quadricep muscles. If we look next at our biodigital anatomy tool here, we can talk about those different muscles. So of course, we first have those psoas muscles. This is going to be the psoas major, the psoas minor. And we think of it as really all one consistent unit, just the psoas. But you can see here how it originates up along the lumbar spine and then wraps down to cross the hip joint right here. So this is the hip joint, the acetabular socket of the pelvis, and then the head of the femur. That iliopsoas runs across it and inserts down here on the lesser trochanter. So if you think of that iliopsoas like a rope, when you pull that muscle, when you fire that muscle, you swing this part of the hip forward, bringing that femur up into hip flexion. The other muscle then that I mentioned is the rectus femoris. So when we think about muscles that activate or cause joints to move, they have to cross that joint. The rectus femoris is the one quadricep muscle that actually crosses the hip joint. So it originates up here on a part of the pelvis called the AIIS. That's this bony prominence down lower. And then it crosses the hip joint and then goes all the way down to join up with the rest of the quadriceps and insert down below the knee. So it actually has two functions. It's going to both flex the hip upwards and it's going to extend the knee forward. So those are going to be the big two muscles involved in allowing O'Malley to deliver that rapid hip flexion as he comes up here to deliver this knee to Vera. If we look at slow-mo then on where this knee actually lands, the one injury that I'd be most worried about for Vera would be an orbital fracture. It looks like it hits him kind of square in the chin, but his neck is actually flexed down forward. And this is good because the closer you can get your chin, your head into your body, the more you can use your muscles to protect from how that energy from a hit is going to be transferred into your brain. So this is a good position to try and be able to take a blow and take a hit. But as the knee comes through here for O'Malley, we can see as it comes up right there, it actually hits more on that right side of Vera's face, right where that orbital is. And based on the amount of swelling that we saw afterwards, I'd be concerned about a possible orbital fracture as the knee struck that orbital kind of protuberance there on the right side of Vera's face. If we go back to our anatomy model and take a look at that, of course, we're now looking higher up. And that orbital prominence that we talk about potentially getting fractured here is actually a protective part of our anatomy. It's there so that when this knee comes in from O'Malley, it doesn't directly strike the eye, right? That knee is coming in right here. And if there was no process there, whether you want to call it the zygomatic process or just that orbital process there, if that wasn't there, that impact would come in directly to the eye and it would injure the eye. But it's here almost like a cushion, like an airbag, so to speak, to take the blow so that you don't have any trauma to the eye. But I would not be surprised if there was some potential break or fracture to that lower part of the orbit. Even O'Malley mentioned after the fight, he felt like something cracked, something snapped. He very well could have been hearing that sound or feeling that sound of when the orbital wall could have been broken. The final part of this is just how in the world was Vera able to take this? And to be honest, in this case, there's not really a good answer for that. If you take the same amount of force measured in G-force, for example, and you hit 10 different people with that same force, they're all going to respond differently. It's not like there's one specific threshold that will always cause a concussion or will always cause somebody to be knocked out. There are some things, there's some research out there on how you can strengthen your neck muscles to limit how much rotation you're getting through the head, to limit that energy that's sent into the brain and instead allow the muscles to absorb some of the blows. There are things that you can do to try and minimize how that energy might be transferred into the brain. But at the end of the day, there's a ton of variation, even night to night. So if Vera were to take this same shot 2 weeks from now, there's a chance it would knock him out and make him go unconscious in 2 weeks. So it's not like you can say there's a 1-to-1 dose of what force is going to cause someone to get knocked out. In a case like this, it's really not so much that Vera has a tough chin, right? We talk about athletes and fighters having a really tough chin. And I think there's a difference between toughness from pain and toughness to withstand and prevent you from being concussed. There's nothing you can do to tell your brain, don't get concussed, don't get concussed, don't go unconscious. It's happening involuntarily. Like I said, there are things you can do where you can protect and kind of build up the muscle strength so that the muscles can absorb some of that impact and help stabilize everything. But if the head is getting violently bent backwards like this, there's nothing you can do from a toughness perspective to avoid going unconscious. So when we hear about fighters having tough chins, it's really more about how much can they tolerate the pain, how much damage can they take before it starts to affect their performance, not just how much damage can their brain take before it results in a concussion, because there's no way to control or measure how much impact or load one person's brain can take before it causes a noticeable head injury with outward symptoms like losing consciousness. And you can't really train your brain to be more resilient to a concussion either. So that tough chin's more about just toughness. I don't know how Vera was able to sustain this again. If it happened 100 times, he probably gets knocked unconscious in a vast majority of them. But for whatever reason, this one he didn't. Just based on the way the forces were transmitted, it didn't get to the point where it was sufficient to cause him to go unconscious, which was what allowed him to continue. So that's it for the video, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed watching the fights tonight. I thought it was a great fight card. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below. Let me know what you learned from this video. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.